Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Netazagunene, and as you'll see by the title, this is a true crime story. So if that is your thing, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe because like we all know, there is no drama like serial killer drama. Alright, so guys, it has been a minute. It's been a minute, but I went home. Those who know. But what's funny is that every time I tell people I live where I live, like normally I would just be like Stanger, because nobody actually knows my hometown. Oh, not nobody, but only people who are within the Mapumulo and Kotuguza area really know where it is. But if you're from Durban, because Durban people always like, it's Stanger, it's so close. I mean, I'm not saying where I am from is far, but I take 2 taxis to get home. Okay, I take an Uber to get to the rank, and then from the first rank, I get to Stanger, and then I take the next taxi to get home. Okay, and it's about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to actually get home after being in Stanger. So it's not close by. Okay. And I just needed to go home because I hadn't been home in like months, and I missed it. I missed being a child, because when I'm at home, I'm the baby of the family. So I get to enjoy being spoiled and being just, not having to worry about everything else that I worry about when I'm in the city and I'm an adult, okay? Because worst hood ever. Such a bad idea to grow up. But nonetheless, I know Iki December, boss. We are now in December, so I hope everybody is getting on with their December plans. Don't go over your budget because January is here in a minute. So don't do that. But I have spoken enough. Today's story, I decided to do the story. Actually, I saw it as an ad. So it was a sponsored post ad on Facebook by Showmax, because this is a it's a docu that was covered on Showmax. I haven't watched the documentary. I don't have Showmax. But even if I did have it, I don't think I would watch it. Because I don't know. For me, true crime story is better if it involves makeup, pretty faces, and it's on YouTube. That's just what I think. But I haven't watched it, but it was on Showmax. I'm not sure if it's still there, but if you have Showmax, you can always just check it out, see if the visuals are a bit different or what they covered or didn't cover from what I'm going to talk about today. So yeah, I've been talking for quite a bit, so let's get right into the story. Today's story is about Stewart Wilken, or better known as Boetie Boer, who was born on the 11th of November 1966. That would make him a Scorpio, so this one is for you, Scorpio. And he was born in Boksburg, which is on the east end of Johannesburg. So not much is known about the earlier months of his life, right? Sorry about the noise. I live in a very small community apartment building, so if you hear something, you didn't hear it. So not much is known about the first few months of Stewart's life. However, when he was just 6 months old, he and his 2-year-old sister were found in a phone booth by a domestic worker. Now, she would send them or take them to her employer, okay? And I want everybody to remember that this is early 1967. She's probably a black woman in apartheid South Africa, okay? So as much as she found children and the first thing she thought of was her employer, that is the best option she had, because just imagine going to a police station with 2 white kids as a black person in apartheid South Africa. It was never gonna work. So I do understand where she was coming from, but I just wish maybe her employer was a different person, okay? So her employer who is only known as Dupe. Dupe subjected Stewart to quite a bit of abuse. These would involve taking out his cigarette on Stewart's private area, making Stewart eat his food from the dog bowl with the dogs. And because Stewart was actually interested in bestiality, he would go as far as making Stewart clean him up, or well, clean him up with his mouth after he was done with the dogs. Now, at this point, Stewart's little sister disappeared. Stewart was unaware as to where she disappeared off to, but would later find out that she actually ended up with being able to find their mother. It wasn't until Dupe was 1.5 years old that he was adopted by the Wilkens, who were next door neighbors. And after seeing him being quite abused, malnourished, and sickly, they decided to adopt him. And that is when he actually got the name Stewart Wilken. Before that, he was just known as Boer. As much as Stewart, or the Wilkens even, had hoped that this would be a new, fresh start for Stewart, Stewart did not do well academically or socially at school. As a matter of fact, the way he narrated, he says that he was oftentimes bullied by the children for being adopted, and the teachers did not do anything to help. As a matter of fact, there was an incident where he assaulted a teacher and the principal beat him, corporal punishment, in front of the same people that had been bullying him. This led to him being quite awkward in school. Also, the fact that he had actually failed the 3rd grade 3 times. Stewart's home life was not much better. Stewart had the habit of biting people. He would bite his mother, he would bite other children around him. And so his mother would lock him up in his room. He would also wet his bed. So his mother would lock him up in cupboards, that type of thing. And I don't have much to say about her way of handling the situation. Again, I definitely feel like they should have sent him to therapy as soon as they adopted him. But I do understand that this is the 1960s, early 1970s. So therapy and the like was probably not as common as it is today. But I definitely think it may have helped. Stewart also describes an incident where he was sent home for fighting a boy in school, and after this he felt like his parents did not support him, and he just made the decision that he would then be his own family. And at the age of 8, he actually started smoking marijuana. When Stewart was just 9 years old, he was invited by a deacon of his church to their house. Unfortunately, this was not a pleasant visit or a pleasant invite, as the deacon sexually assaulted Stewart. It was in the same year that his dad, his adoptive father, which was Mr. Wilken, would die as well. Mrs. Wilken, feeling overwhelmed by the death of her husband and obviously this quite volatile and tempered child, she sent him to a reformatory. This was also not a pleasant experience for Stewart, as oftentimes he was punished by being locked in a room with his clothes off. So he was locked in a room with no clothes on, and the older boys were allowed to assault him or sodomize him. He would try and run away, but he really didn't have anywhere else to go, so he would be forced to come back. At Standard 9, which is present day grade 11, he enlisted in the South African Army, but was dispatched within just 4 months as he tried to commit suicide. This was probably one of the harder parts for me to write, because or well, to read about, sorry, because the extent of the story, I understand, right? But for somebody to have endured so much of abuse, you know, with no outlet, with no, yes, the Wilkens did adopt him, trying to give him a better life, right? But now that we, as a society, understand a bit more about the psychological implications of having experienced abuse to that extent, I really think that there's not much, or there's not, a lot of people go through abuse, okay? But not many people are able to overcome the monsters that they become once they've experienced that abuse. So I think that's why it was so hard for me. He was a child, just a child, and all the abuse that was piled on him, I don't think that he would have been able to escape it without at least some psychological help. After Stewart was discharged from the army, moved in with his adoptive mother to Dispatch, which is a small town in the Eastern Cape, quite close to Port Elizabeth, and this is where he started his adult life. Stewart met and fell in love with his first wife, Lynn, in a nightclub. I imagine that they locked eyes across the dance floor and felt madly in love at first sight. Probably not what happened, but nonetheless, they did get married and have their first child on the 25th of December, 1985. Unfortunately, as romantically as the story had started, the romance did not last, as they had quite a tumultuous relationship. It was reported that Stewart assaulted his wife many times. Lynn, on the other hand, reported that once Juan, who is the name of their daughter, was born, Stewart would not be intimate with her in any other way but through anal. So she felt some type of way about that. Stewart, on the other hand, reported that Lynn had started prostitution, which is why he was uncomfortable with being intimate with her any other way. Nonetheless, they eventually did get divorced. After their divorce, Stewart vowed that he would never sleep with a white woman again. He was basically afraid that it may be his sister, as they had grown up and he really didn't remember what she looked like. Kind of late, because his first wife was already a white woman, but I digress. As we all know, you can never put a romantic serial killer down. Stewart would meet his second wife, Veronica, who was a colored woman. Now, Veronica already had 2 boys, but they got together and had 2 more children, which were both girls. Veronica's parents were not happy with the marriage, as they had received reports that Stewart was sodomizing Veronica's children. It was this that eventually led to Stewart being separated from his second wife, Veronica, and for a time he was or did not have a standard address. On the 22nd of January 1997, 12-year-old Henry Baker was outside playing with his friend. The friend was called back in by his family to go to the store and buy a carton of milk. Now, this tidbit of information actually was strange to me. I know it's 1997, but shouldn't Henry have walked or gone to the store with his friend? But nonetheless, Henry was left alone, and this is where he was approached by Stewart. The friend did see them together, and he even asked them where they were going. But apparently Stewart just said that it was none of his business, and they walked away together. In Alpha Park, Ellen, Henry's mother, wasn't too worried when it was nighttime and she hadn't seen her son. She basically kind of thought that he was in Missionville with his grandmother. But when it came to Friday and she still hadn't seen her son, she went straight to Missionville trying to find him, but when she got to her mother's house, he wasn't there. As a matter of fact, his grandmother had last seen him on Wednesday, and she was under the impression that he had gone back to Alba Park. At this point, Henry had been missing for 2 days. The Child Protection Unit was invited to investigate the disappearance of Henry. Henry's friend, the one that had been playing with him on Wednesday, was interviewed. He was the one who was able to give them the description of the man last seen with Henry. Ellen would then discover that this was Stewart, and how she knew Stewart was that he had lived with her mother for a while when he had marital problems. Investigators set out to find Stewart. However, because he had no fixed address, this proved to be quite difficult. They also found out that he still had an ongoing case against him that was from Veronica's children, and that his first child, Juan, had been missing since 1995. He was the last person seen with her. Investigators were able to locate and apprehend Stewart on the 28th of January 1997. When he was brought in for questioning, Stewart seemed very willing to help. He was very concerned and admitted that yes, he had actually seen Henry the day he went missing, but he had nothing to do with his disappearance because he saw him on the day and that was it. As a matter of fact, that night, he claims that he was with a lady friend, and that's who he spent the rest of the day with. Seemingly with a solid alibi, the investigators let him. Investigators would go on with the investigation and actually found that the alibi was not solid. It was actually false. So on the 31st of January 1997, Stewart was rearrested. Seeing that this may be a tricky investigation, investigators sought the assistance of Sergeant Derek Noseworthy, who was of the Robbery and Murder Unit. This is because he had actually been trained by South Africa's first psychological profiler, Dr. Mickey Pistorius. Sergeant Noseworthy had Stewart brought to his office. He had him sitting directly across the wall that had all his certifications. And there was also a picture of Sergeant Noseworthy's daughter. This is important because while Sergeant Noseworthy introduced himself and also introduced all his certifications, he noticed that Stewart's eyes kept going back to the picture of his daughter. After a while, Sergeant Noseworthy just simply let it be known. He knew that Stewart had killed the children. He also knew that he was interested in necrophilia and had been with the children in such a way. Stewart broke down. He admitted that he was very sick, and as a matter of fact, he had killed his daughter. He had killed Henry as well. He had actually been with Henry's body just that morning. One was last seen on the 29th of September 1995 by her half-sister. She had been at Stewart's house with her mother. Now, Stewart says that he was simply doing a wellness check for his daughter. Apparently, Juan had told him that her stepfather was molesting her. She had even had thoughts of running away. Juan's mother does not confirm this. However, the half-sister did say that they oftentimes had situations where they didn't have enough to eat, and that Juan had said her stepfather was not very nice to her. Stewart took Juan to Happy Valley, where he had spent some of his happiest memories of his childhood. I assume that this is where he thought he could assist her, getting her mind off of running away and perhaps having a bonding moment with a healthy male figure in her life, supposedly. Stewart would then take her to the bush area of the valley, because this is a theme park with the dwarfs, the lights, the like. So he takes her to the bush part of the valley and inspects her. Once he finds that she is no longer a virgin, he strangles her to death and claims that he did not want her to experience or live the life that he had lived. So he sent her soul to God. He removed her clothes and actually slept next to the body that night. Once it had decomposed, he covered it up with a trampoline and was still there, taking care of her clothes as if they were still being worn. The skeleton would later be found by investigators. It hadn't been identified up until that moment when Stewart actually admitted to the skeleton being worn. In the case of Henry, Stewart claims that he had met him at Uncle Park. He says that Henry had asked him about sex, so he took him to a nearby park. This is where he performed a fellatio on the boy. Once done with the fellatio, Stewart asked Henry to lay down on his back. At this point, Henry no longer had his clothes on, so Stewart sodomized him. When Henry cried and protested, Stewart strangled him to death. In Henry's case, Stewart also claimed that he had advised or told him that his parents were also abusing him or physically abusive. So he was just simply protecting another child and sending his soul to God. Henry's parents refute this. They refute all allegations and simply say that they were parents reprimanding their child when they were naughty. Stewart then proceeded to show the bodies or where he had left the bodies to the police officers. Surgeon Noseworthy was not comfortable. He felt like there were definitely more bodies. So he goes back to where Stewart was being kept and confronted him. He said he knew that there were more bodies and Stewart had to fess up and tell him where they were. Stewart, being the guy that he was, confessed and admitted that there were at least 10 bodies. He would then proceed to make a full confession to his lawyer. Once Stewart had made the full confession and it was in the hands of investigators got busy cracking down the cases that had previously been unsolved that matched the descriptions that Stewart told them. Stewart's first confirmed murder was committed on February of 1990. He murdered a 15-year-old Monte Fico, who was a street child. He had coerced him to go with him to a nearby secondary school where he sodomized and strangled him to death. On the 3rd of October 1990, after a fight with his then wife, Lynn, Stewart went and picked up a prostitute. Virginia Geisman was a 25-year-old prostitute that Stewart had picked up at Russell Road. He paid her and took her to Dagbrook Primary School, where they had intimate relations. He then penetrated her anally, and when she protested, he strangled her with her clothing and met his peak as she died. On the 10th of January 1991, Stewart was solicited by another prostitute. She was 37-year-old Marcia Popinus. They had met at a Red Lion Hotel. They went to St. George's Park, but once they got there, Marcia wanted her payment up front. This angered and annoyed Stewart, so he strangled her. He didn't leave right away, but he sodomized her and then he left her body at the park. On the 21st of October 1991, Stewart met another street child who was 14 years old. He alleges that they had agreed that they would have intimate relations for money, but when the boy requested his money up front, Stewart strangled him to death, sodomized him, and left his body at St. George's Park. Stewart's next victim was also a street child, but he committed this murder in 1993. Same method, same cause. On the 27th of July 1995, Stewart met and killed his next prostitute. The prostitute was 42-year-old Georgina Bonisazweni. He met her and took her to Alfred's Park. He strangled and sodomized her, but he wasn't done yet. Still filled with lust, Stewart would sexually assault her multiple times with a knife. As a matter of fact, the forensic pathologist confirmed that the wound was star-shaped, as though the assailant had stuck it in, stuck it in and pulled it out multiple times. Stewart was not done with assaulting her body though, because he cut off her nipples and ate them at the scene. In 1996, between May and August, Stewart would strangle and kill 2 more victims, one being a 22-year-old prostitute and the other being a street child. Stewart told Sergeant Nosworthy that he had returned to the bodies of the boys that he had killed to get the scent of the bodies, or rather to ensure that the police dogs would not be able to find the bodies easily. He rubbed vinegar on the feet. He also confirmed that he would roll up pieces of newspapers to insert into the body's anuses so that maggots wouldn't crawl up there. This was to ensure that the passageway was clean and he was able to perform necrophilia. Stewart still denied having any sexual relations with one before or after her death. I don't think that makes any of what he did better, but hey, at least he was one person to not abuse his own blood, I guess. Initially, Stewart appeared in court on the 3rd of February 1997 for the murders of Juan and Henry. However, once Stewart was seen to be connected to more crimes, he was eventually charged with 10 counts of murder and 5 of sodomy. However, after much investigation, he was only charged with 7 counts of murder and only 2 of sodomy, as these could be proven without a reasonable doubt. The deciding judge over Stewart's trial, who was Mr. Justice Chris Jansen, found Stewart to be guilty of all 7 counts of murder and the 2 counts of sodomy. On February 23rd, 1998, Stewart was sentenced to 7 life terms in prison. The judge also said that had the death penalty still been in effect in South Africa, he definitely would have sentenced him to hanging. He also mentioned that throughout the case, even when the evidence was provided and the pictures were there, the recordings, everything was being seen by the court, Stewart not once showed any sign of remorse or regret. As a matter of fact, there were times when witnesses or forensics were said to come and be witnesses, serve as witnesses, where Stewart would excuse himself to go to the toilet, and Sergeant Nosworthy confirmed that he would make signs at him showcasing that he was going to the toilet to masturbate. Stewart's wife, Veronica, was there during the court proceedings and the trial, throughout the trial. As a matter of fact, when he was about to go back in and the sentencing had happened, they spoke for a couple of minutes and shared a passionate kiss. Now, I don't understand Veronica's mental state at that point, because sure, a lot of people would say, well, she probably knew the whole time, but really, this man raped and killed so many children and prostitutes and did many appallable things. But I guess it's an unconditional love, and I'll probably never understand it because, I don't think so, guys. I'm so sorry. Especially knowing that he ate people. Okay, one person, but who knows? Okay, who knows? Maybe that was just the case that he felt comfortable enough talking about. And he slept with dead people. People that were a minute away from having maggots crawling up. And just because he closed off the anal cavity does not mean that the rest of the bodies did not have maggots and were stinking up all over the place. Like, how? Sway? Anyways, Sergeant Nosworthy was able to track down his mother, and Stewart was actually able to be on the phone call with his mom. His mom, she said that she had never abandoned them. The story, of course, does not really continue, but that's what she said. And I guess in a way that offered him a reprieve, and that offered him some kind of consolation, because he allegedly was so emotional on the call, and it was the first time he had ever called anybody mommy. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I can just imagine, right? So I don't necessarily feel all that bad for him because of everything that he did, but at the same time, it's like, Stewart is currently serving his time at St. Albans prison, and he suffers from illusions and delusions. And Sergeant Nosworthy says or claims that once he had no power over any victim, he reverted back to his old self where he was the victim. This was a hard story. First, it was hard to record because it's so long, but it was also hard because I'm the type of person who can see both sides of the coin. You know, I can understand that there's nobody who is just black and white. I can see that a lot of us do have our certain gray areas, and knowing or kind of dabbling in human psychology, okay, don't get me wrong, a lot of people have a lot of bad things that happen to them throughout their lives, right? But we all handle it differently. I just don't see, without therapy, of course, when he was still younger, I don't see Stewart being anything different than what he had become. But of course, we can always discuss it in the comment section, so be sure to comment, like, and subscribe this video. I shall see you guys on the next one.